everyone. Today we are putting away our sewing machine and pulling out our circular knitting machine. Fall is here and that means cooler weather, which means my body is saying let's play with yarn. So I woke up this morning and had an idea to make a little witch's hat, and that is what I'm going to show you how to make today. So let's dive right in.
And if you want to support the channel and purchase a digital pattern, you can head on over to Flower and Inker on Etsy, and under Knitting Machine Patterns, you'll find this pattern along with many others to choose from. However, you do not need the pattern to follow along with this tutorial. Now we will be working with the Addi 46 today and creating two different pieces to make the hat. You can also use a Sentro 48. So let's start by creating the brim. The brim is just a simple tube, that's all it is. So you're going to cast on without waste yarn and you're going to go around 16 rows. Once you've knit 16 rows, you're going to cast off with a darning needle and pick up all of those loops. This will give you an open-ended tube on each side. Next, you're going to choose and cut out your filler material. So you can choose a CD if you have old CDs, some plastic if you have it around the house, cardboard, which is what I use today. So with the cardboard, I cut about a 4.5-inch circle. That's my preference. Now to assemble the brim, you're going to start by cinching one end of the tube. Once you cinch that closed, you're going to create a knot and tie it all the way off. The next part is to add your brim filler to the center of this circle. Once you've done that, you can cinch the other end as well. One key tip here, if you want your hat to lay flat, maybe you're going to set it on a flat surface or you want to use it as a pet hat, I do recommend leaving a little bit of a circle in the middle so that it does lay a little bit more flat. Now the next piece we're going to create is a little bit more complicated. We are going to be making the cone. So if you haven't worked with panels before, I will link a couple of videos below to help you out. So essentially we're going to be creating a triangle by gradually increasing the number of pins that you're knitting on with your knitting machine. So we're going to start by casting on to just 2 pins. After you cast on and place your yarn in the yarn feeder, you're going to go back the opposite direction just for 2 pins. Then this is where the increases begin. You're going to knit back the other direction once more, but now you're going to add an additional pin. So at this point, you'll have 3 pins. Then you're going to go the opposite direction and pick up another pin on the opposite side, and you'll have 4 pins. And you're going to continue to go back and forth picking up an extra pin until you get to 24 rows. After you get to 24 rows, you're going to knit an additional 2 rows with no increases. After you've knit the 26 rows, you're going to add waste yarn. This is an important step. Again, if you're not familiar with the reasons to use waste yarn or how to use waste yarn, I will link a video below. But this is going to give us a nice clean finish on the bottom. So knit a few rows of waste yarn until it falls off your machine. Now we have the top of our hat. The last thing we're going to do to this piece is we're actually going to finish the end using a crochet slip stitch. You can also use single crochet if that's a little bit easier for you. And if you don't want to use crochet at all, you can simply use that yarn tail, use your darning needle, and go through and pick up each of these loops just so that you don't have any live loops. I choose to use a slip stitch because it was nice and secure and it did finish really well on top of the brim. So here you can see I'm just going in, picking up the live loop, pulling it through and doing a simple slip stitch all the way across the bottom of the triangle. Once you've picked up all of those live loops, you're going to remove the waste yarn. The next step is going to be to fold it in half with your right sides together. This just gives a really clean finish for the stitching we're going to do down the side. You can see that I'm using some clips to keep the edges together. You can use stitch markers as well, or you can just eyeball it. So you're going to add your darning needle to that bottom yarn tail. And then I just like going back and forth. I feel this is a very secure stitch. You can do a whip stitch if you want, or whichever is most comfortable for you. But I find just going back and forth, picking up a couple of stitches on each side from the bottom to the top works perfectly for me. After you've secured the sides together all the way to the top, then you're going to tie off those yarn tails together securely. Last thing you're going to do here is take the tail and you're going to put your darning needle through the very center, and then you're going to turn the cone right side out. When you pull on that tail, you'll have a nice crisp point and have just created the cone of the hat. Now you have both pieces complete and are ready to assemble the witch hat. We're almost done. So you want to add some stuffing to the top of the cone. It will be a little visible, so you can use dark fabric scraps, or in this case, I'm using a dark stuffing that I found at a thrift store. And then you're going to attach the cone to the brim. I'm using stitch markers. That just helps me visualize it so I can keep it in the center of the hat, but you can use whatever method works for you. Then to attach the cone to the brim, I just did a whip stitch. And what I did is I picked up a couple of stitches on the top and picked up a couple of stitches in the brim. And I repeated that all the way around, making sure that there were no gaps and that it was secure. Once I connected the two pieces, I tied off the thread tail and then I hid it in the middle of the hat. The last step in this process is the fun piece. This is where you can decorate your hat in any way you want to. So the first thing I actually did was tied a knot in the top because I am going to use this as a hanging hat. Then I found some fabric selvage that I had laying around and I just tied that in a loose knot on the back of the hat. And that's all I did for this one. But you can feel free to add a colorful ribbon, add some additional embellishments, change the color of your yarn, whatever you want to do to customize your mini witch hat. And that's all there is to creating your own mini witch hat using the circular knitting machine. Don't forget to like and subscribe and check out my knitting machine playlist for more projects and tips and tricks on the circular knitting machine. Until next time, everyone, see ya!